Morning. It's a very long game thus far, but we're almost at the end of the tech tree. And it's one of those quit conditions because there's no point going further than the tech tree. And there's still some minor things to do, mostly just to adjust the personal wage. And there's still a fair bit of debt that we accumulated when the economy crashed after the cake war ended because war generates profit and shit. Well, technically it was because when people plugged their fantasy selves into the power grid, it turned out we didn't have enough power grid, and then the industry tanked, and once the industry was basically at zero and we got the power grid to work again, the industry didn't restart. So that's what happened. So now we have to pay off the massive debts that we incurred, as well as very slowly reduce the taxation, as well as some of the healthcare items, and the education. But it's mostly about maintaining a healthy surplus at this point, and then slowly boosting the individual expenditure items. And it's gonna take a while, but it's in no way like immediately required. We're at a slight deficit because for some reason this reports 3.21% deficit, but as long as it's in the green, it's actually reporting a surplus. We're mostly at a deficit because building these hydroelectricity things and geothermal things ended up costing quite a lot. But we needed it to catch up to the electricity demand. We had a electricity trade, but we canceled it because it was very inefficient for us. Soon as we got enough surplus production to be able to make do without it. We are also slowly building biomass, but no more fossil. But we're trying to maintain the rainbow nature of our power generation in that each compartment doesn't have too much, because you can literally feel the illness when one of these is too much. So we'll have to make do with decreasing the numbers. It's weird feeling something like wind psychosis when your wind power generation is too much. It's a weird sensation. You almost associate it with the way things are supposed to go, but you notice something's a little bit off that you can't put into words. And then you finally find the power supply network input, and then you go like, so that was the thing. We're going to keep the Prime Minister's wage with this thing.
Here is our growth forecast.
As the same as what we get in the real world. As you can notice, indicators are going bad because the tax cut increased rather massively recently. So these will improve in time. As soon as the power generation models here get completed, the deficit will improve a little bit, and then we can start reducing the taxes. But as you can see, people are poor. We were doing very well until the economy imploded. So there's that. As human development is increasing, population growth is very slowly going down. We are definitely at a low point because of the power grid problems we had. If we'd had a extra surplus of like 4 terawatts, we would have been fine through the transmission. But that's what happens when 40% of the population suddenly start reporting for power consumption and water consumption and others. When you get like an instant bonus into your population, your grid tends to go a little wonky. Could be that because the population shows a distinct spike in these ages, it could be this particular age reaching into 18. Could be that jumped the economy. Could be, and now it's gonna produce lower numbers because we got the birth rate under control. Otherwise, we would have had like 100 million people in Madagascar by the 21st century. Now we're looking at maybe 50 million. I have full abortion rights and full contraceptive rights, and when, thanks to I think the Human Development Index improving, we'll get a birth rate reduction. And once we start infertility rates approaching the Western standard and start to look at this like we're going to eventually stop the decline in population, I'll go from promote contraceptives to just authorize contraceptives when requested, and that'll spike the birth rate and give us another like 30 years of positive growth. We didn't have to do a one child policy, but we were thinking about it. One child policy, when lifted, has a very small effect on birth increasing, but when put into force, has a serious impact on birth reduction. But once you reach a fairly low birth rate, like two or even Madagascar's case, 3 per family, and then you lift it, it's not going to jump up to 5. It's going to jump to 2.15 at most.
Our network has been.
And I can't compensate the plague victims yet. I don't have the money. Used to have a lot of money, then my economy imploded. And there was recently a actual hurricane in Madagascar, and they had like under 100 fatalities. And I looked at the pictures of the site, and it looked like I was expecting it to look like shack houses, like basically the type that you find in slums that are built from like steel plates and wires, basically. And these were actual like communal strong wood buildings, and they didn't collapse in the hurricane, unlike those flimsy like metal plate houses. So the fatality rate was low. So actually, it's not in as much dilapidated. They're just not modern houses. So I may rethink my policy of fixing all the dilapidated houses because they aren't technically dilapidated. They're just wood buildings, old wood buildings, or like
Our network.
modern built old style wood buildings, not like steel wire. They withstand hurricanes quite well. I was surprised. Because we got 40% economic growth in one year. Our inflation went through the roof, so we had to raise the interest rate to combat it, which is still taking some time to translate
network
into stronger currency unit, but it's slowly getting there. Dollar is really gaining on the euro and on the yen. while euro is really losing on the yen. Euro is not doing pretty hard. We've actually gone down from the beginning against the dollar, but we've gone up against the euro. Almost looks
Good
like a
morning.
Ukrainian flag there. God damn it, you ought to give me better terms.
Sure.
You're giving me better than I get from the market, but you're still taking a huge profit with you. We don't have much of an army if we're at the same strength as Cyprus. We don't have much of an army. I think when we finally have enough money to do the national service, we'll have a large army, but that'll take time. Because we have such a large population that implementing national service is going to give us a large amount of manpower to work with. Still be quite vulgar. Still be quite Stalingrad. Not much fun in Stalingrad, no. 100,000 Germans were captured at the end of this battle of Stalingrad, and about 5,000 made them home after the war. You ask me, they'd be better off all just dying and wandering off into the tundra. That's what I think. Government honor. Modi. Modai. I spy with my Madai. Something beginning with P. Total break. Christopher Paul. May, June, July. A couple more months. I'm looking at 25 million a month in these currency units, but it will require me to raise the wages of the normal person as well. Otherwise, the wage will be inordinately high. But average GDP per capita is already 5 million, so it's not that much. If they make 5 million a year, I make 25 million a month times 12. That's about 30 times more. If you look at this thing, it says I think top 1% makes 21 times what the bottom 1% makes, or something like that. I don't know for sure.
The terrorist. Usually,
We are waiting. The rioters. The rioters have. Our network has been pop.
You make more than a double than the average worker in this country. Pretty high wage.
The rebels have set up. We have subdued the rebel.
Not liking the deficit and not liking the fact that I'm already at high taxes.
Your economic record.
5 years ahead of me. Does that mean that it was research for me as well? It was. help you. Wages are already high. It's about tax reduction. Get the economy going so we'll have actual money.
Listen, you should.
If our next income is more than 1 trillion, I will reduce the taxes. Police strike is really causing a deficit.
Everything has been implemented in the. Your economic record.
Ooh, would be nice if I could get like a 100 trillion loan from the IMF and pay off all these other debts and just pay that 1% or even the 0.55% of the World Bank. Still estimating a surplus for the next quarter. Cut my energy drink consumption to 1 can a day, and now I'm feeling a pretty strong Johnson for the energy drink. But 1 can is enough. I don't want to get diabetes. I'm already noticing some early symptoms. So it is showing a rather sizable surplus even with the police strike. A month and a half to go.
Our network has been partially disbanded. The only
You're doing a...
This oil platform and all these together still produce no gas and no oil, which is very unfortunate.
Our scientific cell input.
Now exactly a month to go before the next budget estimate comes in, and we'll see if we're producing a surplus or a deficit. I'm thinking surplus, but it might not be as big as I'm expecting. I am, however, expecting a surplus. I'd like to get into top 100 military powers, but we don't have the money for it. If we get like 10 trillion surplus at some point, then we have money for it. Even 10 trillion probably won't be enough. A reserve covering an actual reservist training for anybody who wants one in the country is quite expensive. I'm hoping that with the oil production from the drilling rig, we'll actually get some oil production into this country. We could do with some domestic oil. Really jonesing for like 3 energy drinks a day, but I looked over my previous blood tests, and even though in the Finnish system they weren't in the pre-diabetes range, in the American system they were, and that's enough for me. Their measurements regarding obesity problems due to their obesity pandemic are a little bit harsher than ours. So if I want to stay with the, let's say, harshest reasonable healthcare estimate, because I like being healthy, then I'm gonna have to go with prediabetes.
Funeral will take place next.
Oh, it actually came this month.
Our financial performance.
So we actually had a surplus. How much did we have? We have enough to reduce taxes. Not by much, but at least a little bit. How much is 1, 2, 3? That's about enough for a year's reduction. And I'm not going to listen to the parliament on this one. We need to lower the taxes immediately. To boost economic activity.
bill has been voted on?
I thought July was the sixth month because 4th of July, but evidently it was the seventh month. So GDP is going up and unemployment is going down. Budget deficit got a little bit worse, but nowhere near as much as I thought. There's still everybody is living basically below the poverty threshold. But it is looking like if we keep reducing the tax and increasing the debt payments, we will be
Our scientific
able
cell.
to reduce the unemployment enough to have an actual employed population because currently we're too low. I want to play Japan already, but this game keeps sucking me in. I almost quit at the last crisis, but after being convinced, I did come back, so it's a close call. These loans are a huge budgetary item. Luckily, their interest rate is below my domestic interest rate, so it's gonna be good. Inflation is going down, but it's slowing down the reduction. It's still going down, but it's slowing down a lot. The ginormous spike in our inflation after the economic spike was really not good for us. After all these are done, I'll probably build one bio. Solar will soon be less than wind, less than geo. Because there's 3 more geo to build and each builds 25, so it's gonna be 0.75 and it's already pretty close to that. It's gonna be 0.04 above solar. And hydro is probably gonna be a little bit below geo.
Our scientific cell info.
For the moment,
Really hoping this oil platform will actually produce oil. Now we have 1 terawatt hour of surplus. It's not much, but we have something. At 3 solars and the same production in other miners except fossils and bio, we might be looking at building the first generation of nuclear power plants. We might be looking at that. It will radically drive down the cost of electricity. How that Madagascar's southeastern part near the desert is going to get more hurricanes with the change of the global weather pattern. They might think about reforesting the desert with all the extra water that they're going to be getting. It's relatively easy to build fairly efficient dams in the desert. They aren't like super efficient, but they aren't meant to be because they're there to control the amount of like sudden water flow. So building things like lakes in the desert when you know that it's actually going to be rainy from now on helps turn the entire thing into like usable land instead of desert. Yeah, it's good that unemployment is dropping. President of Algeria.
I'll give you a quick update on the sit-in. The demonstrators, the participants of the sit-in. Here is our growth forecast for
The reduction in taxation caused a minor uptick in the economic growth, but not very good.
our sportsmen are ready.
We should still be getting a surplus, though it won't be anywhere near as much as it was before. But because we have a treasury reserve and the only thing we're building thanks to having a surplus of energy for a while now will be houses which are very inexpensive. They consume a lot of manpower though, so we should be fine with a very small surplus and a paying off the debts and an increase in economic growth. If we get the unemployment to 3%, I think we'll be fine again. Oh, I'm gonna break the bond one day with all this knocking on the walls. Finally solve some of the overheating problems. There's this tool that comes with this NVIDIA graphic drivers that I have that you can use to set your power usage and like overclocking things to be ecological, so they use the least amount of power and all that stuff. But every time you update the software, you have to write the settings in again, so it was a little bit cumbersome, but I forgot to do it last time. That's why the computer was so prone to overheating. But now I have it at the proper settings, so it probably won't overheat as much. I can even keep the keyboard on top of the laptop. You can notice that the game is starting to get a lot of variables to calculate because even with the very slow advance rate, it's still being cumbersome.
We could create.
Just the police, thank you. I know they're gonna be unable to contain that one, but still, just the police, thank you. At 17% support, if you send the army, it's basically the end of your regime. It's gonna devolve into a riot, I'm sure. thinking of raising my wage incrementally to 25 million and keeping it there. Then the personal wage I'd have over here is the same as I'd have if I work at my highest paid job that I can get, which is writing poetry, actually. I'd get about $50 an hour. But the personal wage isn't going to matter worth dick if the value added tax is so high that 100% of the country lives below the poverty line. If we get any surplus next 3-month estimate, which is going to be coming in, I think, 1st of October, I think, then I'm still going to be reducing the taxes. I'm not going to touch the education and healthcare services until unemployment is lower, which is the only way to lower it at this point is to lower the
Just a week
taxes.
ago, would you?
Good morning.
Ugh, it's a very low price, but
Sure.
I'll take it.
We are in a dead end. You did not do.
For the new government, I make the following pledge. I will reduce value added tax until unemployment is controllable. Then I'll look at budgeting more money for healthcare and education. And I will continue repairing houses. That is my promise for the next government. Repairing houses and paying back the debt and lowering the taxes. That's what we can look at. July, it continues to diminish. But in my defense, let me show you. I know this isn't going to convince you because you live in the real world, but
We are in a dead end.
I can no longer reduce my CO2 emissions because my area deforested is at 0, but it doesn't reforest for some reason, even though my budget is at maximum for it. I think that's what they call bug. So because I cannot deforest more, I cannot reduce the emissions more, so the planet continues to be humped. And it is not just me, there is this list of countries at 0 that should be starting to reforest, but the game is bugged and doesn't let them. So that's going to have some kind of effect on the global healthcare situation, environmental situation. Because of that, I cannot say that the environmental estimate in this game is true. I would be at a quite a sizable carbon sink if it allowed me to reforest. Madagascar has a lot of places where reforestation could be done. A lot of places, like the southern desert, could be turned into agricultural land, which would suck up a lot of CO2. And there are a lot of marginal land that could be reforested again and made to be better at resisting things like hurricanes and mudslides. There's a lot of forest management things that could be done. saves are starting to take really long. It's like playing in an old Commander 64. Wait a while, and the reduction in taxes will cause a reduction in unemployment, which will have a doubling effect on the economy. And we'll be able to start funding the other government branches again, but it'll take a while, so just wait.
The movement seems to be
I don't know how low we'll get the poverty rate, but it won't be 100%.
the sit-in begins to run out of steam.
Good morning. I didn't. Sure.
Should not have bargained on that one because that would have been a huge budget item.
You are
But they were offering so freaking low. We would have hardly made a profit on it. And I don't like the fact that they pay an average of 100 for something and we make an average of 65 and something and they offer us a deal at like 68. Don't like that. Maybe offer me a deal at 80 and I'll take it. I should have still taken that because we have a huge surplus of those goods and we didn't have many already budgeted for sale, so we would have still made more. Still, it doesn't feel right to be doing 60 on something that you get like 90 out of. Doesn't feel appropriate. With Japan publishing the positron or something, that particle that they found, there's very little on the tech tree left studying, so we get almost no spy techs. And the fact that we published all that technology is giving this planet a huge economic growth rate. Everybody's got what they need now, so the planet is growing at a 5% average. And even though our economy is doing quite well, at least it was a while back, it was still barely competing against the global economy. That's what happens when you release all that patented stuff. The economy actually starts growing. Now, if I was only an international banker that had an interest in making money through other countries like that, I'd be sick of the hella rich. Technology trades, in my opinion, are one of the most efficient ways to make money. At least in the short term, because in the long term, your enemies are gonna get a better level of technology because of you, but in the short term, it's gonna make you a lot of money. And if you do it well, a lot of those countries won't be your enemies after the trade. If you do it well. Still need that one technology, the long-term living in space, for that space program to actually function, but it's gonna take a while. It's evidently quite different from just visiting the ISS for like 2 weeks to living there for like 3 months. It's evidently quite different, and some would even say difficult. I don't want to convert this entire country's housing population to big houses. Let's look at doing something like improving a little bit in the housing pool. I know you guys don't live in mud huts and steel wire buildings, but let's improve it a little bit nonetheless. Let's talk about in-house plumbing and some other things that might be beneficial.
The terrorist organization.
Let's see if it even gives us a surplus with this level of deficit.
Our agent number 1.
I guess we are at a very low deficit. Still says estimated surplus. And still says actual deficit is closer to 2%. Inflation is starting to stabilize. Despite our best efforts with this level of poverty, we're not going to be climbing against the dollar. No, I promised you that, but we can look at it again after you're not all unemployed and poor. I could give you a good education or healthcare, but to be honest, I think I'm going to give you jobs because I can't give you all of those things. Jobs seem like the thing that most people in this country are currently looking for. The total cost of making sure that everybody has all the technology that's
Our network has
fairly commonly available is lower than I expected. the planetary GDP is doing numbers that nobody would believe because of it, though. We're getting planetary growth rate of 5% a year. Usually it's about 1% or 2. Even if there's one large economy like China doing 7%, it's not going to boost the planet to 5%. So if planet is 5%, China might be doing 15%. The US could easily be doing 7% growth. Easily. Wouldn't even break a sweat at this point. I'm doing like 1% due to my economy being on the verge of collapse. 0.85. I really wish I'd made that bionics trade. Which country is which? And actually likes us. Let's try Ethiopia. That ought to help us a little bit.
We are awaiting your instructions. The rioters have taken control.
see if those trades had had any influence on my economy. Probably not. $15.45 is still pretty low. Still not high enough in surplus to cover the cost of the economic sloop. $14.95, hope they agree. Still a little bit of a profit, but not much. Might have to try somebody like the US afterwards if South Korea is doing not that bad.
The rebels have set up a
Maybe
barrack.
a music award.
Incredible.
Usually when you play a good note, like in this case with the trade, we get some kind of reward. Trade balance went up a lot. Like I've said a couple of times, I'm specializing in bionics, implantolins, specialized mechanical devices that help with mobility or, in fact, make you better than average. That's my specialization. I'd like to make it through organic technology, but gene editing of humans is still a little controversial, especially if you do it to adults. So bionics it is.
The current political orientation.
Nice. It's 3 trillion. And sells almost all of our excess fuel batteries. Now when we get
Clashes have.
our next budgetary estimate, it might be very much in the green. Won't be as much as I'd hope for, but it could be something besides a 5.3% deficit. Let's make it 100 billion. We have a currency reserve, so it's not going to increase our debt. You can't get your compensation immediately because if we do that, no foreign aid organization is going to send us anything.
Incredible. The first.
And then we get first prize for helping the plague victims. If we pay you immediately, no foreign entity will send us aid afterwards. But if we wait, they'll send us aid, which we can actually use to reduce the domestic cost. But if we do it for too long, we'll start to see an impact in trade as other countries become upset at us for not helping our poor. If we have any surplus at the next budget estimate, I'll reduce taxes, and if it's a large surplus, I might even look at the like funding a few steps of the school renovation policy because it is the largest education related item to keep the schoolhouses in good condition. And I thought that maybe have a lot of teachers and have a lot of homeschools, like not having the facilities that require something on the order of 10 trillion to maintain, but some facilities, which is incidentally why we can't build more schools. Once population growth drops below 0.75% a year, I'll go against the unlimited contraceptives. Also means that child mortality, because we can't afford to build more hospitals, won't go lower than it already is due to healthcare availability. It might go lower due to the increase in people not like under the poverty line, but not by much. As you can see, the people are pretty set on being below the poverty threshold. Gross national happiness rose a little, as did HDI. Had a little bit to do with the trade, but not by much. Population growth is exactly 1% and going down slowly, 0.996. Fertility rate remains steady, and child mortality is very slowly raising, while birth rate is going down. Not at all good numbers, but not the worst I could be getting. People are liking the countryside. Urbanization is raising very slowly. Usually, when you have a lot of poverty, urbanization rises fast because at least you can get some level of deep down poor job in a city. So the poor usually migrate into the cities at massive quantities. That's usually what happens when poverty increases. Now we're finally having a large market for our bionics. Ethiopia. I'm at a pretty interesting point in my AXCOM campaign. Finally looking at perhaps the first base invasion that they do to me. Previous round I lost during the base invasion. I had no chance against that many enemies, but this time we'll see. Because it triggers only after you capture one of the aliens alive, so I have been able to hold it off until I get better equipment. And because these debts are actually paid back if you have a surplus at the end of the year, not in these 3 month intervals, and it means that the budget will at the end of the year get a lot better because a lot of the debts get paid. So as long as I maintain an okay surplus throughout the year, at the end of the year, if I have a lot of debts, there will be a sizable surplus that will really help. There will also be a lot more workers available as soon as the wind turbines and such are constructed. At least we're under 600,000. Maybe aim for 50% on healthy housing. I'm gonna aim for around 2 or 3 terawatt surplus. I'm gonna aim to keep only one generator building being constructed at a time. The rest are gonna go to building those houses. And I wouldn't say a small, sparse brick house is better than a large, well-built family longhouse. I wouldn't say that. These sparse brick buildings where everybody has their own little cow feeding area is not all it's cracked up to be. But if I make a deficit in this turn, then I really don't know what to do. There literally is nothing to do at that point. The unemployment rate going down is an enormously good thing. Really can't lower the unemployment benefits at like all. We're 2 hours below the European Union mean, so I don't want to make the work week any shorter while I can still focus on the GDP. Minimum wage isn't pretty high if you look at GDP per capita. And neither is minimum solidarity allowance. Though compared to the fact that GDP per capita is yearly and those minimum allowances in my like lock-in standard procedure are monthly, the minimum is actually almost the same as the actual GDP per capita, which is why we'd get a lot of these protests. And if they are yearly numbers and the GDP per capita is also a yearly number, then I cannot lower them. So, because I do not know, I'd prefer not to touch them at the moment. Gosh, I hope I get a surplus. It is estimating a mild surplus.
I don't usually like.
energy budget is going down a lot. It used to be a huge amount.
Good morning. I didn't come empty-handed. In fact, I wanted you. Sure.
The household purses remained.
The keyboard on top of the laptop was causing an overheating issue, which was causing it to slow down. I took the keyboard out and it should start cooling on its own. Especially if I keep it at this slow speed for a while. I need to anchor NATO's eastern corner with the democracy for fixing the Japan thing. But I kind of feel like anchoring the Indian Ocean is more important at the moment. I kind of feel like that. Madagascar is a good country for that because it's at like the easternmost corner of Africa and it's an island, meaning that it's pretty hard to do a successful guerrilla campaign against them, but it can be done. The biggest problem is that it's a single topic agrarian society. It's like looking at the US in the 1750s before the revolution, when the guys who led the revolution were for the most part, the big noble families that owned a lot of land. 5 more days, so I'm not gonna pause for this one until the end of the month. And when we get the budget estimate. Economic growth did pretty well after I did the 2 surplus trades. They're gonna bring a lot of money in. It's noticeably faster now. Started to cool down and it's no longer quite as hot as burning. Once the reactor model actually works, I'll be able to use my own money to buy electronics instead of always using them for drugs. That all depends on this. We are now making a mild amount of profit because we are actually slightly above consumption. Profits are 5% of what we got on the bionics trade alone, so not much. We're looking at keeping it under local jurisdiction, so not making a federal case out of it in either direction, but letting the local people decide whether or not to set up coffee shops or not. It's for them. This would be making a federal case out of it, and I think this would be better for a local case. This was by far the hardest decision of this gameplay and most likely my entire career. But the reality is that if you are feeling like you are competent and you say you don't want to be resuscitated after death, you have that right. You literally, if you are competent as far as we can observe, you have the absolute right to decline medical treatment, and that is not possible if passive euthanasia isn't possible. And I realized that you cannot force healthy people, sick people into healthiness. It doesn't work like that. So passive euthanasia, but you cannot break the doctor's oath either. If it didn't do no harm, then you are allowed to do nothing. You aren't allowed to give them a overdose of morphine, but you are allowed to do something. If the patient truly chooses to end their care, if it is, for example, a psychotic patient who would prefer to go through the justice system with their psychosis and spend their time in prison, in the grand scheme of things, as a doctor, you cannot say no. You can advise them that going through the prison system will be harsh, but it can be done. Always keep the door open for them to return and do not be confrontational. Make it as easy as you can for them to return to care and make sure that they understand that they can at all times return to care. But if they choose so much as a wiggle your pinky finger if you're in kind of consciousness and want us to help you, and you wiggle your pinky finger, then we're gonna assume that we have permission to help you. But if you make it absolute, then there is nothing we can do. You have that choice. You can end your life if you desire. For that purpose, passive euthanasia. The right for a doctor is to observe you killing yourself. The right to not interfere. That is as far as I will go. It cannot be no right. Because then, if you see a psychotic patient, you are legally obligated to stop them and give them treatment, even if they say they do not want it. That is what no passive euthanasia actually means. But that is as far as we will go. So if we have a surplus, we will reduce the taxes again and create a better unemployment system. We are thinking that the solidarity allowance and minimum wage are monthly basis, which means everybody gets the minimum and nothing more. So we are thinking of lowering them at this point. But I would prefer to lower taxes instead of the minimum wages. I would prefer to do that. Especially since it has been shown that lowering the taxes at this point has a very positive effect on the unemployment. So halting government expensive construction and paying back debts and lowering taxes. That seems to be the course of action at this juncture. Besides, looking at the town from my point of view, we've done quite a lot of construction recently. For almost like 10 years during the little slump in the economy, everybody did public projects like repair houses and roads and infrastructure and such. Very tiny surplus.
Good news. Our financial performance.
Very tiny.
Funeral with
How much is it over here? Very tiny. I will give you 1%. Hopefully that is enough. Fairly large support, so I will let it go. I will also do a little bit of work around the minimum solidarity allowance. It's much 1%. Sorry, Parliament, I'm gonna have to overrule you on this one. It's high level of unemployment. It's advisable to do some of these changes. One third of what you were paid, you will get in allowance on top of your solidarity allowance when you do become unemployed, and it will be for only 1 month. And you will get 20%. That should help a tiny bit, but we, as I predicted, saw me being overthrown as a result. It's hard work fixing the economy. I'm gonna continue for a while. I've got nothing better to do.
The bill has been voted. The bill has been voted. We
are in a dead end.
The demonstrators.
You're really peachy. We are awaiting your instruction.
The rioters have taken control of the square. The decree takes.
Police. Pretty good at recognizing flags and countries, but I need to get a lot better. It's possible the reduction in minimum wage and solidarity allowance actually humps the economy because there will be so very, very little money going around.
The rioters have taken control. A rebel was accidentally.
Without a real surprise.
The battle has taken a new turn. It's overwhelming to. We have subdued them.
Here is our growth forecast.
Good morning. No.
Our agents that have
Now the laptop is a normal warmth again. I'm gonna get a tabletop computer, get all my old computer hardware from all the storage places they're at, and put together a tabletop computer because laptops aren't for me. They just aren't for me. I understand them, but they're not the interface I want in terms of hardware. And then I'm gonna spend about $500 getting this laptop completely fixed. And no, you're not gonna make an attempt on the Maldives prime minister. Only there to help us dismantle the terrorist organization. To get the laptops fixed, I might get it actually cheaper, and then I'll be incredibly wealthy by my own estimate. Only because I'm no longer a drug addict having to buy my supply. That'll make me, in my opinion, incredibly wealthy because I have the minimum government pension and or social care per month, and that makes me, after having solved this anxiety problem, incredibly wealthy, in my opinion. After about 6 months of being on my own reactor, I'm gonna start investing about 300 euros a month into just stocks, and that's gonna be in a couple of years and a humongous pile. I have shown a fairly good method of investing that I'm gonna keep doing. It is called the 3 cups method. You make 3 bets, and the 2 bets are always against the 1 bet that you make. So in effect, you're making 2 bets that you'll fail and 1 bet that you'll succeed. And you won't make it in a term where you lose money in either case if it goes relatively normally and the victory or defeat just happens. that you'll only lose if it's a defeat of enormous proportions. For example, buying oil, alternative energy, and nuclear will guarantee that most likely because the planet's energy production seems to be, especially consumption, increasing. You'll make some amount, but you won't be tied to the oil or the nuclear or the renewable markets themselves, but you will benefit from the trend. I like to make it in terms of short term bets, long term investments, and metals. That's how I made it last time. And in short term bets, you should find this very specific company style. Old company, recently under new management, still owned by the family, run to the ground in a family that would like to keep the company going for some reason. They will most likely allow the administration that took over, which is most likely somebody's nephew or niece or some halfway incompetent nitwit, to kind of try to salvage the situation after it's been proven to blow up in his face. And that should guarantee the company some form of stability. And even if they fail, they'll probably afterwards increase in value by being placed under not the nitwits rule. So those kinds of companies are your safe bets. And that's about it.
Our national team were the tournament.
That's because if you buy $100 worth of their stocks, for example, and you get something like 10,000 stocks because their value is at 0.1, before they start to move the company forward in a healthy way, one of the things they'll most likely do if it's run by family, which means somebody who likes a autistically organized set of numbers, is that they'll do a stock buy-up and stock merging, meaning that they'll most likely invest money in the firm by buying out the risky investors and at the same time increasing the stock value. So that it's closer to something that can be called reasonable, like $1 for share. Then they'll put it under new management and see if it can actually turn any kind of profit. And then they'll wait a few years. Once it turns a profit, other investors will notice and its company price will go up. And at that point, holding on to it is academic. It's just one company amongst many. If you want to keep it in your long-term investment portfolio, you can. You're no way obligated to sell it. Just because you can make a profit if you sell it now doesn't mean that you can't make a profit by holding on to it. And then if you don't want to hold on to it, you can sell it and then buy more of those types of minority corporations. For a corporation that's publicly traded but gets like at most $10,000 worth of revenue and it's all from family members, getting somebody to actually buy into the corporation might just be the thing it needs to start. A lot of these economic systems are based on lowest hanging fruit and how easy the generator to produce the fruit into a factory would be. And then just looking at what's available and picking the low hanging fruit. For our modern system, for a long time, it was just waste. But Germans have proved that it can be efficiently treated. It is a large country that recycles almost all of its waste. They have been at points, as has Sweden been, where they need to import waste as a developed Western country just to cope with their industrial demand for metals. Which to me goes to prove that while it hasn't been solved as a planetary thing, it is no longer something that has not been solved anywhere, meaning it's starting to be less profitable as a short-term investment, a bet. And then metals into just seeing what kind of trends people are doing. Are they making a lot of bikes, for example, that would be aluminum? Are they making a lot of computers like smartphones that would be precious metals? And so on and so forth. and then just betting on the trend and holding on to those metals. If it's starting to be war-like, for example, then perhaps steel and tungsten. It depends. And once you have those cups placed in the fashion that I'd instructed earlier, if it does go to war, your metal prices will go up exorbitantly while your other two go down. And if it remains at peace, you will see metals go up slightly. Your bets remain hopefully roughly equal to long-term bets. There might be some rise, but I would say comparable with planetary GDP and inflation anyway. And your long-term bets should be mostly doing the short-term bets should be mostly fine. A few here and there have vanished, and a couple have gone up way more than 100% in value. So total overall, after a couple of years, you should be maybe 10% bonus, maybe, if you're lucky. I managed to do about 5 to 7 in just the stock market, and then I looked at how much I made and cashed out. I didn't need to keep doing the work. I proved my concept. I have it in an old investment bank account. You can notice that the ministry budget is going down very, very sharply. That's because these very expensive things are being paid off, and after they're paid off, the debt that was incurred in building them is going down. I'm very saddened that my deficit is at least 7%. I'm very saddened by that. We're gonna have to see the year-end numbers. It looks like reducing the social services was very harmful to the debt rating, the deficit. Seems though we will have to see it because, yeah, trade balance didn't improve much either. GDP growth went up by almost 1.5%. I'd hate to put interest rate below inflation, but I suppose I need the money. So not much. It's also gonna have a GDP fastening result. Speedening, increasing.
Our network has been.
So we sold both of the main production categories that we got from the spying, which were fuel cell batteries and Great Public Bionics. We have still some way to develop before the other techs become useful, and it took us from here to here, and took this from here to here. So we're looking at about 5 trillion more. The fact that we are at such a massive trade imbalance is not very good.
Our network.
We might as well reassign this guy to more. He's already in Madagascar. So now my morning tar has all been scraped. When you have an evening out smoking and you use the water pipe the next morning, you usually have a tiny bit left, and you can go through and clean all these things, and then you have a little bit left. It is akin to drinking and then going through all the cans and pouring into one can. But such is the life of a junkie. At least these days I shower.
The preparations are.
Our network. You are our network.
Good morning. Sure.
Our scientific. Our scientific. Our scientific.
Here are the GDP and growth figures for the last year. As you know, these are the terrorist organization. Academics. Here is our growth. Purchasing power is on the
That seems about done. We may have gotten the unemployment done, and we may need to increase the value added tax by 1%. We reduced it by 4%. And we got the electricity surplus done, so next up is the houses. Gonna ease off on the electricity construction because the one neighboring country with an electrical connection to us also has a large surplus, so I can rely on them for the changes we have. Now we're at like 5 to 15% surplus. Now it looks like with the unemployment solved, or at least going in that direction, even if we have to increase the VAT a little, if it continues to improve, we may look at a steady budget improvement. As you saw when December rolled into January and we made our yearly payments of the debts, the amount of debts actually reduced by quite a lot because we were running at quite a surplus, even though it didn't show that. So even at a stated 7% deficit, we have quite a surplus. So that was good. Thank you for watching.